Hello and welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by our resident quarterback draft savant, Adam Emmerich. Because Adam, over the years, we do this show, and inevitably we talk quarterbacks. And I've noticed over the years you've got a pretty good hit rate of guys that you like and don't like, and we don't have to get into the ones that you've missed and whatnot, but it's like, hey, it's draft season. Who knows if the Seahawks are going to take a quarterback, but why not put this out there and see how you do and go, because I think how we've done it in the past, it's kind of been, just kind of crammed into an episode. Let's give it its own time. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous about this one. Because just cramming it into an episode was one thing, like coming out and being like, these are the quarterbacks that are gonna do well, and these ones stink. Like that feels like a good way to set up the fall for sure. Look, you and Clinton kind of cajoled me into this, and I'm fine with it. We're gonna go through it. It's interesting to do it this year because this is maybe the most interesting of all the years since I kind of started breaking it down. What would have been like 14, 15, somewhere in there is when we kind of started doing it. So yeah, we'll see how this goes, but I don't know, man. I feel like I do it a little different than other folks.
I feel like you do have a unique look at it because just judging by the way things have worked out, and talking to you, you always put guys in the box of, can't play or is going to be like a legit NFL quarterback. And then guys that are kind of, you have your question marks around. So, and I don't think people generally look at that way. A lot of times it's, well, this guy, it's all about potential, and every guy has a ceiling, I suppose. And it's just that, guys like Trey Lance, the Trey Lances of the world, they have a low floor and a high ceiling, and really trying to fit where that, the most likely outcome would be is kind of difficult.
Yeah, for sure. So I tried to break it down, like, because Clinton's like, well, explain how you go about it. And I was like, yeah, sure. How do I explain this? I mean, basically, I've been watching football since I was 10. So I've been watching quarterbacks for 35 years. You see some of the things that endure and things that come and go and things like that. But you're right. I play the what's more likely game a lot. And it kind of starts with, is this guy likely to be a starter, a viable starter in the NFL or not? And so it kind of starts there. But I think the way that I do it a little different is because I'm not a college football connoisseur. I don't know the teams. I don't care. I don't know their stories. I don't know anything about their character, right? So that's one big caveat. Like, I failed on a couple picks because I didn't know Zach Wilson was a douche. I didn't know that. I didn't do the interviews. So, but
never played the game. Let's get that out of the way right now.
Totally. I'm not a GM. I'm probably not better than a GM, although the hit rate's been pretty good. But I don't watch highlights. I don't watch the combine. I don't watch pro days. I don't look at other people's lists. I don't look at stats, and I don't watch college ball throughout the season. Those are things I don't do. And then kind of the next thing is like, I'm looking at these guys and I'm looking at if they're quarterbacks or athletes. Like, I'm not looking for guys who are athletes who are trying to figure out how to play quarterback. I want a guy who can play quarterback. And if he happens to be an athlete, then holy cow, the ceiling's probably pretty high. So that's one of the things. Accuracy over arm strength. Can you layer throws? Like, is it all just fastballs or is it all just lollipops? That sort of thing. Do you have tight window throws on your tape? And those are harder and harder to come by. Are you running to throw or are you just running? Just ducking your head and going. I value floors slightly more than I value ceilings. So like I put 60% emphasis on the floor and then 40% on the ceiling. And do you need a very specific coach to succeed in the NFL? Do you need that? Like, there's some guys like they have to have this dude. Like, I don't think Mahomes is Mahomes without Andy Reid. I really don't. I mean, Brett Favre wouldn't have been Brett Favre without Andy Reid. And
that, like, if Cliff Kingsbury were Patrick Mahomes' NFL head coach, he wouldn't have become Patrick Mahomes.
That's right. He was limited by Cliff Kingsbury back when he was in college. So there's that. Can you work past the first read? Like I said, the what's more likely game, How's your pocket awareness? Do you have at least functional mobility? And I could give a crap about a dude's age. Like, if he's good, he's going to play for 10 years. I don't care if he comes in at 25 or 20. It just doesn't make a difference to me. And
28-year-old Brandon Whedon.
well, and again, it wasn't about the age for Whedon for me that I didn't like, but yeah, exactly. What do they look like in big moments? And do they put the balls in harm's way a lot? Like that's another thing. And then I think the biggest thing that I ask myself, can they succeed in 2 years? Because let's face it, you're a GM, you're a head coach, you put your job on the line to draft one of these guys. By the end of year 2, it's got to start to look promising. Otherwise, heads start to roll. So, and that's why I'm a little more interested in floors than ceilings, because guys got to hit the ground running. And, the idea of, well, this guy has an unlimited ceiling. That's awesome. Will you ever live to see the day to get there? And that's kind of the way I look at it. We'll see how that shakes out compared to everybody else. I'm sure there's going to be some things that people will fry me for. And of all the years to do this, this is the year that I'm sure it's all going to fall apart and I'm going to look terrible. So we'll see how it goes, man.
We started this show to have fun. This is fun.
Yeah.
It's fun whether you're right or you crash and burn.
Mhm.
And we'll let people judge which of those they find to be more fun. And I feel like this is a fun show because these are the dudes who are kind of the scrubs that we want to get through. The guys that are kind of, they might have some promise as a backup quarterback, or if they get in the right situation, right? Those types of quarterbacks, and we'll kind of group them all together because as far as I think you're concerned, these ones, and we can frame it in terms of the Seahawks, if they're looking for a backup quarterback to maybe compete with Sam Howell, then maybe they fall into this group.
Right. And look, we say scrubs or, kind of the guys that are at the bottom of this. And I just want to start it with like, no disrespect to any of these dudes. Like they made it to be a starting quarterback in college football. Like that's not the elite of the elite, but boy, it's damn good. You have to be really good to get to that position. It's just whether or not their game is going to translate, if they have anything that they can bring to the NFL, is kind of the way that I'm looking at it. So of this group, man, there's a certain amount of dudes here that I think just, if you bring him in as a UDFA, cool. But burning a draft pick on any of these guys, I don't even think they're likely to be a backup. I think they're one of these guys. They're, the John Skeltons of the world and, guys like that. Right. So that list for me includes Sam Hartman, Brendan Armstrong, Caden Slovis, Tagovailoa. Let's see who else here. Gavin Hardison, and let's see, Leary out of Kentucky, and the kid John Dre's, whatever his name is, that they brought in for the visit earlier. That's kind of that group to me.
How dare you? How dare you with Sam Hartman, a super hot college quarterback, and you have him on the undrafted side of the draft, huh?
Look, there's some things that he does well. And one is he's the handsomest dude I've seen in a long time. Like, I mean, he's Josh Brolin reincarnated. It's pretty interesting, but he's got good
amazing
touch.
Hair.
Oh. Amazing hair. But he's got good touch to kind of all levels of the field.
Yeah.
He actually reads the field pretty well. He has to have like a clean pocket. You watch a lot of his Notre Dame stuff. And when he was doing well, I mean, nobody sniffed him. And, he can run around a little bit and can hit some guys on the run, but really, he does get flustered when you get a little pressure on him. And while I value accuracy way more than arm strength, you have to have enough arm strength. And he just doesn't have enough arm. I mean, after about 20 yards, everything just dies really hard. Look, he maximized his college career in his college quarterback potential. And I think that's to be applauded.
Yeah, and I went back and I watched some of the Sam Hartman highlights, and one thing that was evident was that a lot of his biggest highlights were against, well, you kind of took offense to the scrub quarterback comment, but I'll say scrub schools. Like when he was playing Duke and Navy, like he looked lights out in college, and that maybe is what helped elevate him a little bit. But yeah, those are where I saw most of his big highlights. But like you said, with being able to layer throws, that was good. And in terms of arm strength, the combine, I know you said you don't watch the combine. I watched the combine, and it was pretty evident of the guys that he was competing against.
Mm.
He did not have the same arm strength. But what was cool, I think he was the only quarterback of his group to actually compete and run a 40.
Oh, interesting. Well, good for
Yeah.
him. And again, it seems like a great kid and all that stuff, but I, I'm not even sure he's a serviceable backup. Like he's on the edge of the serviceable backup tier to me, of all those guys.
I'm
Um,
surprised you had Devin Leary on your list.
yeah, look, he can't move very well. He's kind of like Will Levis, but way lesser. The arm's okay, but the throwing motion is this big looping over the top thing that is so slow.
Hmm.
The accuracy is inconsistent, and I don't know, man. I just if you burn a sixth on him, maybe I guess, but there's just nothing special there. There's nothing that stood out where I was like, "Ooh, that translates every day on Sundays."
Because the guy that he kind of reminded me of, and maybe he tightened up some of his throwing motion at the combine, because I thought he threw well at the combine, but going back and watching him, some of the things that he did in terms of progression and mechanics, I kind of thought he was Sam Howell-ish.
Well, there you go.
But we've already got Sam Howell, so I mean that's fine. But and he's probably, I think he's actually 24, so he's a year older than Sam Howell too.
There you go. And look, you know how I feel about Sam Howell. I guess he's a fine backup. I don't know that.
He's the
I just don't
future
see
of
him
the
as
Seahawks, Adam. Knock it
yeah.
off.
Yeah. Hey, the snail had a great comment on one of our videos, kind of just needling me on that one. That was fun. But yeah, that's kind of where it's at with him for me. I don't know if any of the other names stood out to you within there that you kind of want to go through, but I didn't have a lot to say. Brennan Armstrong is the one on there that what I do is I find videos. I'm going to say the tape. It's a YouTube video. So
Right.
the U tape. I look for ones that are cut up every single throw from a game. I don't want highlights. I want to see what you do down in, down out. Couldn't find that of him. So basically, it's kind of an incomplete. Like I don't
Okay.
know. That I couldn't find enough.
He's probably not that big of a prospect then, if you couldn't find that much out of him. Because some of the guys that you mentioned, I mean, Spencer Sanders, when I look at the mock draft database big board, like he's ranked 481. So I didn't even go down that far. Tagovailoa is at 329.
Yeah.
Keaton Slovis of BYU at 328. Jason Bean at 286, who was actually ahead of Devin Leary. So I did watch a little bit of Jason Bean, and I did not even see much in the highlights that was worth talking about. I was surprised that he was ranked ahead of Leary for that matter. So, yeah, I think that kind of leaves us in the territory of Joe Milton, Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler, um,
I put Spencer
and
Sanders in with them.
you want to put Spencer Sanders in with them.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start with Pratt. Watched a fair amount of him. And one of the things that stood out is he's such an easy thrower. Like the ball just comes out. He doesn't have to, he's not trying. Like it's just real smooth and it looks good. There are NFL throws on his tape for sure, where you're
Yeah.
like, wow, that was impressive.
He has
And
the look of a prototypical NFL quarterback, like just the build, right?
absolutely. And then, the ball placement and accuracy, like the accuracy, he goes through spurts, but the ball placement, it gets really spotty at times. And that really bothers me. And he is mobile. He's just college mobile. He's not NFL mobile. He feels like Daniel Jones light to me. They very similar prospects in my opinion. I came away watching 5, 6, 7 games of Michael Pratt and being like, meh. Could he be a backup and come in and fill in for 2 games and get you through till your starter comes back? Yeah, maybe, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th round guy. Sure. Okay.
I'm surprised to hear you say that he has the NFL arm, because when I was watching some of the highlights, a lot of those throws were ones where the receiver was having to come back to the ball, or you know really measure their route to try and be there when the ball arrived.
Yeah, it's super borderline. Like I said, there's NFL throws on the tape,
Okay.
and some seams and slants and things like that, and some tight window stuff that you're like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, he's not an elite deep ball thrower, and it's not it's not going to wow you. There's no doubt about that. Maybe a Garoppolo kind of arm, maybe a little less somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
So Michael Pratt ranked as on this board as, and again, mock draft database, it kind of compiles a lot of the draft boards and giving you a composite ranking. 122. So if you,
Okay.
what's that? Top of the 4th round ish.
Sure. Yeah. And I honestly don't look at it as where you should draft a dude. I don't care. Guy can play, draft him. Like if he can play, draft him as high as you want. If he can't play, then don't draft him. Like that's it to me. I could care less about the round in a lot of ways.
Well, and I'm just thinking in terms of where the Seahawks are able to pick, right? Because I guess, what did I say? Did I say 140? Oh, 122 for Pratt, which would put him, middle of the 4th round.
Yeah.
So the Seahawks have a pick there at 118.
There you go. Yeah, he could be available and he'd be fine. I wouldn't even be mad. I'd be like, okay. I mean, I get it. He come in and be possibly serviceable.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where you want to go next? Because you've got me curious about Sanders.
Well, and he would be the next guy up for me, Spencer Sanders. Now, again, to go back to how I do this, I don't know their stories. I don't know what they're doing, where they're going, all that stuff. I just turn on the game film, the U tape, and just look at it throw after throw and see what I see. And just looking at that, like that's the closest thing I've seen to a Russell Wilson moonball of all the guys. Like his deep ball and touch with getting a little bit of air underneath of it is really good. That's one of the things where I was like, wow, that's actually pretty special. He's got enough arm. It's not amazing. I wish there was a bit more there. And I think that's maybe why on a lot of his deep shots, he's got to put a little more air under the ball and that sort of thing. He's good in the pocket. He's got good pocket presence, and he's actually pretty damn mobile and can spin out of things and move around and is good on the run, both to his left and to his right. His footwork, and people bang on footwork a little too much, I think, but his base gets super wild, and that's when he starts getting really inaccurate, when he's not marrying up his feet to the rest of his body. And there's some tight window throws on the film, and he played for 2-3 years for Oklahoma State. And this is where I had to look into the guy's story, because I was like, well, how come nobody's talking about this guy? Like, I like him better than a lot of these other dudes that I've been looking at towards the bottom here. Like, there's stuff here. And apparently he forced his way last year out of Oklahoma State to Ole Miss, and then couldn't beat out whoever the hell was playing quarterback there, or got benched, or whatever it is that happened. Stopped going to his classes and couldn't even like suit up for the bowl game and that sort of thing. So maybe there's some mentals there and attitude stuff that we're not aware of, but especially if you could bring him in as a UDFA and just see what he's got.
Sure.
Heck yeah, man. I think he's got backup potential, like Tyrod Taylor type potential.
My favorite, when you Google guys' names and it has the questions that people generally ask. And the top one, when you look at Spencer Sanders, why is Spencer Sanders not playing? A lot of people had that question.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what happened there. Just the stuff at Oklahoma State looked like there's something there. Now, is he a head case or have problems? Maybe. That we don't know, and the story seems to kind of lean that direction.
Yeah, and the rankings might indicate that too. So, but when you're talking about undrafted guys, why not?
Yeah.
Why not take a chance?
Why not take a chance? Saying this.
All right. Where you want to go next?
We're going to go with Joe Milton of Tennessee.
Yeah.
He's a guy. He's a one-read wonder, man. Like, that's it. He looks at one dude, stares at him the whole entire time, and then he throws it as hard as he can, just right at the dude. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And this is
And if it's
guy,
not there, he runs like a super athletic dude.
yeah,
And I don't know how you can't lead with the fact that he has an arm cannon.
okay. Well, the arm is wildly strong, wildly strong. No doubt about it. But when I said earlier, like how I do this, like I'm looking for quarterbacks. And if you happen to be an athlete, that's cool. That's how Joe Milton is to me. He's a guy that is an athlete trying to figure out how to be a quarterback. And it just really shows. Now, if there was there's a certain place for him, I think, in the league, and that would be behind a guy who has a similar style. Like he would have been the perfect Cam Newton backup back in the
Mm.
day. Like same Cam was a much better thrower and got through reads, and but they kind of run the ball in the same way, right? Big, physical, pretty quick too. There's things to like, right? But in terms of just playing quarterback, I don't know. Like I find it interesting because I think if you took Anthony Richardson out of last year's draft and Joe Milton out of this year's draft, flip flopped them with the competition that they had around him in that draft, I think people are talking about Joe Milton a little bit like they talk about Anthony Richardson. Like that's what it looks like to me. Hose can run, does some really incredible things at times, but really the nuance of playing quarterback, like they've got so far to go.
So are you saying that in terms of if Milton were to come out last year, it just in terms of the quarterbacks that are available, because
Mhm.
is it a depth of quarterback class issue then that he kind of falls into this position for you? Or is it, I mean, Richardson would kind of, I'm curious of how you're making the comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of the list off the top of my head for last year, much past Young and Stroud, but yeah, he probably would have been like QB4, QB5, something like that because of the arm and the running ability. The running ability is going to get you by as a backup, right?
Right.
Like you get in there, you're trying to survive for 2, 3 games until the starter gets back there. A guy that can move around and move the sticks just with his legs, like that goes a long ways. And I think that's where Joe Milton's value is.
And when we look at the draft big board here for Joe Milton, 179. So a few, that would be kind of toward round 5, maybe even round 6.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, take a flyer, right? And again, a lot of these guys, unfortunately, they get pushed down the board because of how many guys that are in this draft that, and if you've listened to me over the years, like, I don't know how many times I've been like, there's like one dude in this draft.
Right.
In this draft,
Well, it was like the Malik Willis draft, right? Because I think if you were to look at Joe Milton on tape and kind of the similar things, athletes playing quarterback, I think Joe Milton has, a more complete tape than Malik Willis did coming out of college.
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah. I think that you see a little more sustained accuracy out of Milton. Not that it's great, not that it's NFL level or anything like that at this point in his career, but yeah, he's kind of that sort of project kind of guy to me. I think he would be a really good fit in Baltimore as their
Right.
number 3. I think he would fit in there well, could operate that offense and, be the emergency starter there day one.
Well, let's move then to Spencer Rattler of South Carolina. This guy was a fun one to watch the highlights. A lot of highlights. And like you said, a guy who has some tight window throws, has some nice 50-50 balls that he throws up. I enjoyed watching a little bit of Spencer Rattler.
The number one thing that jumped off the tape for me for Rattler was he's a tough MFer, man. Like his offensive line was not good at South Carolina. I mean, I don't know, maybe the stats say something different, but just watching the tape, man, he would stand in that pocket and just get crushed and still stand in there and try to get the ball off. Now, often he was kind of throwing in desperation and was putting the ball in harm's way a lot. That was one of the first things that I came away with from him was just like, my God, like he would throw 4 picks a game if he played like that in the NFL. Like
Or if he
you're not
didn't have Leggett to throw to, because I felt
right.
like he bailed him out so many times. that, that's where a lot of those highlights come from, where he's hanging in the pocket, throws it up, and Leggett, it's not even a 50-50 ball with him. It's more like an 80-20.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Leggett looked great, I guess, that last year. Apparently, that wasn't how he played throughout his college career, but really looked good the last year. I heard somebody say that. Um, the thing with Rattler is the accuracy is so all over the place. Like, there'll be stretches where you're like, dang, that was like 5 balls on the money. And then, dang, that was 6, 7, 8 balls that, like, no, like, they're terrible. And, the ball placement gets erratic along with that. I really think he's at his best when he's on the move, and he's not trying to process, because he kind of, I always watch the back stripe on their helmet as they're trying to go through reads, right? And you
Right.
can watch and see them checking through dudes, right?
You can tell
And
the ones who are actually checking through dudes versus the guys who are just going through the motions to try and make a defense think that they're going through progressions.
right. And he falls into the latter for me. Like, he either just dead locked onto a dude and stared him down and hosed it in there, or he was, I wouldn't say pretending. That's not the right
No,
word,
but
but
you do, it's kind of faking. Like, you
yes.
look to one side, you look to the other side, maybe you move your shoulders a little bit, and so you can tell that that's part of the play more so than a quarterback going and reading the defense.
Yeah, and to me, when I was watching it, like, I just kept thinking to myself as he was going through reads, like, slow down, Spencer. Like, it was just like, boom, 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 like, just went through them real quick. And it's like, you couldn't have possibly gotten through that read because the route hadn't even come close to developing yet. And it was almost like he was doing it to do it. And maybe just the game was moving a little too fast for him. And that was kind of the last thought with him, was it does feel like it all moves just a little too quickly for him. And
Mm.
if you want to take him in and, give him 2, 3, 4 years behind a legitimate starter in a system that, is quarterback friendly with a good coach, like, could he turn into a bottom tier starter? Yeah, I think so. I think he's probably most likely to end up being like a Drew Lock. I think his floor is like Mitch Trubisky and his ceiling is like Andy Dalton.
Okay. Yeah. An NFL starting caliber quarterback.
Dalton, yeah. Yeah, for the
Yeah.
ceiling.
Right.
Yeah, and then you play the what's more likely game with him, and it's like, well, is it more likely that he ends up at the Dalton level, or being in the Mitch zone? And it really does feel like the Mitch zone to me.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the rankings because Rattler is kind of at the peak of this group that we've talked about. Ranked number 89. At his peak, ranked 34. So a guy who people are kind of considering at the top of the second round, along with Michael Pratt. He peaked around that area as well. And as I go down the list now, Adam, the one guy that's kind of in this group that we haven't talked about, and maybe it's a tease for a future show,
Mm.
Jordan Travis. We didn't talk about him.
Oh, yeah. It is a tease for
Because
a
there's
future
two
show.
shelves. I mean, when I look at the big board, there's 6 quarterbacks who everybody kind of has a consensus that could all go within, potentially the first round. And then everybody else behind Spencer Rattler, it seems like kind of and that's how it could play out, I suppose, is that 6 quarterbacks could go in the first, I'd say round and a half. I don't think we're going to see all of them go in the first round, but maybe they do. And then maybe people start going through their favorites toward the third round, end of the third, that sort of area.
Yeah, I think there's basically like 4 tiers in this draft, and we went through the
Mhm.
first one of like dudes who you're like, I mean, you can if you want, but I wouldn't waste your time. And we went through those. And then the guys that we just went through, where I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe. Like, I could see them as a backup.
Yeah.
And then the next tier is like, I could see them as a legit starter. Like, that's, if you spent a first round pick on one of those dudes, like, I get it. I get it. They've got, if you're playing the what's more likely game, like, I think pretty much those, because I'm throwing Travis in there with them, those
Yep.
7, I'm like, yeah, I think it's probably more likely than not that they can be a serviceable starter. And then the top 2 guys who I think are the only 2 that I'd look at and go, hey, if you want to trade multiple draft picks and try to go get one of these 2 dudes, go do it. Obviously that's probably not going to happen considering the way the Bears and the Commanders are quarterback needy and all that stuff. But like, if you're just kind of looking at their value, like to me, the top two guys, their value would be, if you want to trade a couple extra draft picks away to go get one of those guys, I think they would be worth the risk. And, the rest of that group, the next five, if you can stick and pick and, you got a first round pick, the guy falls to you and you use it, I think it would be a smart enough pick, especially if you're in the market for a quarterback.
Well, something to talk about as we move forward. So those 7 guys going to be Jordan Travis, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Drake May. Not necessarily in that order. I tried to jumble them up as I went through. In fact, I don't even know who your top guys are. So it's going to be fun for me learning about who you would select moving forward as we close in on the 2024 draft, Adam.
Well, I know there's going to be at least 2 to 3 that people are going to think I'm crazy. And
okay,
that's okay. I mean, it was kind of like last year with Bryce Young when I went back and watched Bryce Young tape 15 times. It was like, what am I missing that everybody else seems to think is great here? And not that I'm right yet about Bryce Young, but early returns kind of point that way. And I'm not saying that about, that it's any particular dude. You'll have to tune in and find out. But yeah, it's I don't see it exactly the same way that the pundits seem to.
All right. Well, we will look forward to it. Appreciate everybody joining in. Subscribe to the show, youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast. If you want to become a member of the flock and help support the show, you can go to getintheflock.com. And we're going to have more football coming at you throughout the draft season. Here we go, Adam.
Here we go. Tune in and revel in the fact that you'll probably be able to tell me I'm wrong. It's going to be a good time. And we'll go from there.
And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.